Welcome back to the Rush Limbaugh program. I'm Michael Knowles, filling in. We are on the search around this country for spines in conservatives, in Republicans, especially in elected Republicans. It seems when they were doling out the spines, a lot of elected Republicans, I don't know, they were too far back in line. They didn't get any. There is one guy, though, who does have a spine, who is standing up, who is leading the fight against some of the madness and the power grabs that we've seen in not just the past few weeks, but in the past many years. That would be U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, who has the distinction of being not just one of the top U.S. senators in this country, but also one of our nation's top podcasters. I think he is the only person who can do both. Host of Verdict with Ted Cruz. Senator Cruz, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, Michael, it's great to be with you, and as your listeners no doubt know, you're the co-host of Verdict, the podcast.
Well, that is true.
We launched in January of this year, and so you and I spend time every week trying to drill down and understand all the crazy things happening in this country and really get to the substance and the facts. And so appreciate your having me today.
Well, one thing I've noticed, it's not just that spines are in short supply, but also understanding of the issues is often in short supply in Washington. It turns out Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appears to think that the Democrats lost the House majority. That headline just came out. If only that were true, but it's not the case. Obviously, she's not paying too close attention to the issues there. And you have. And when we launched our Verdict podcast, it was during impeachment. We were meeting every night at 3 a.m. in an undisclosed bunker in Washington, D.C., and really going through exactly what was happening, what were the facts. And now we're in a time period that is as crucial, you would say, and as confusing. A lot of people don't know exactly what is going on. Senator, you were a lawyer during the Bush v. Gore recount back in 2000. So you have been in these kind of election messes before in the trenches and the front lines. What are we looking at? Where does this election fight stand right now in terms of the ballot counting, in terms of the courts, and in terms of the final result?
Well, you're right. We've seen this before as a country. We saw it 20 years ago in Bush versus Gore. And at the time, I was a young lawyer, was representing George W. Bush, part of the legal team. As you know, I wrote a book that came out a few weeks ago called One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. And there's an entire chapter on One Vote Away recounting the inside story of Bush versus Gore, what happened behind the scenes. And I think there are a lot of lessons for today, the recounts that are going on right now, the litigation that's going on right now. If you remember back to Election Day, on Election Day in the year 2000, initially the news media called it for Al Gore. They said Al Gore had won Florida. They said Al Gore was the president. And I still remember Dan Rather gloating on air, being so happy and triumphant. And then the problem was that the voters disagreed as they tallied the votes in Florida. Turned out George W. Bush had more votes in Florida than Al Gore. And late in the evening, the media had to retract their call. And then even later in the evening, they called the election for George W. Bush in Florida and nationally. Once again, Dan Rather painfully had to acknowledge that. But then it turned out that was premature, too, because the results were very, very close in Florida. Al Gore sent in an army of lawyers to the state of Florida, and for the next 36 days, we had litigation in Florida. I was in Tallahassee for that entire time, and at the end of that proceedings, once everything had been litigated and resolved, then once it was final, we knew the winner, and the winner ended up being George W. Bush. I think that is analogous to where we are now, where the media wants the results to be Joe Biden. It may end up there, but we need to let the proceedings play out first, consistent with the rule of law, consistent with the Constitution.
But, Senator, I've been reliably informed by the mainstream media that President Trump is an authoritarian, grabbing onto power, upsetting constitutional norms. This is outrageous. It's unprecedented. It's never happened. And what are we? We're about 10 days into this process or something? I don't know. 10 days seems like less than 36 days. What is this process? Because the media are presenting one side of it, but it seems, as you say, that there are legal mechanisms, constitutional mechanisms to decide this election, and we haven't reached the end of them yet.
That's exactly right. You know, the media, Donald Trump broke the media. That they hate the president so much that as soon as they had any plausible basis to do so, they gleefully declared the election for Joe Biden. And then the consistent position they have is anyone who dares question that is somehow a radical destroying democracy. Well, here's a radical thought. How about we actually let the election process and the legal process move forward? There is litigation, there are recounts, there's contest litigation in states all across the country, and that is how the rule of law operates. Now, it may be at the end of this process that Joe Biden prevails, but the objective should be that every legal vote that was cast should be counted.
Right.
But that every illegal vote that was cast shouldn't be counted. And the way to figure that out is not what some random person puts out on Twitter, but it's rather we have a legal process where courts consider evidence, consider direct testimony, consider expert witness testimony, and assess whether the law was followed. And to the extent it wasn't, the job of the court is to make sure we do follow the laws. That is our system of democracy, and it is what the Constitution sets up.
Right. We are speaking with Senator and podcast host extraordinaire, Ted Cruz. Senator, a lot of the issues here seem to revolve around 2016. It just seems like in many ways we're relitigating 2016. And of course, in 2016, there was some corruption. It just appears to have been happening in the Obama administration and in the bureaucracies, spying on President Trump's campaign, framing President Trump's appointees, investigating him, trying to throw him out of office. I was wondering, when you very graciously agreed to come on the show today, I was wondering if I would have to be speaking to you on a telephone from a jail cell somewhere because of your absolutely annihilating attack on former FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe earlier this week. Former Deputy Director Andy McCabe, this crooked FBI official, was testifying before the Senate, and I felt people generally went pretty easy on him. Except for you. You really hit the nail on the head. You backed him into a corner, and I know it's a complex issue, but can you just explain a little bit about that corruption and what we might see if any of these people will actually be held accountable?
Yeah, no, it's one of the worst aspects of the Obama-Biden administration is they deeply politicized the Department of Justice and the FBI and the CIA and law enforcement and intelligence, and they turned the FBI and DOJ into essentially an opposition research arm and an attack arm to go after their political enemies. And it, we've got centuries of tradition in this country of the Department of Justice being apolitical, not being a partisan tool. And Obama and Biden corrupted that. And if you look at the top of the FBI, you had James Comey and Andrew McCabe, and they willfully targeted President Trump because they hated President Trump. And they went after General Michael Flynn in a way that was truly shameful, and they've dissembled. They've lied about it. If you look at Comey's testimony and McCabe's testimony, they're directly contradictory. And I actually think last week's testimony by McCabe was very important because it's the first time he's testified under oath, under penalty of perjury, and he testified specifically that James Comey authorized him and it gave him the green light to leak to the press.
Right.
Comey has testified exactly the opposite. One or the other is not telling the truth. And I'm certainly frustrated that it's taken 4 years and we haven't seen people held accountable. We haven't seen people prosecuted. And I very much hope, at a minimum, in the next couple of months, that the Department of Justice moves forward with enforcing the law and holding people accountable.
Absolutely. Senator, very quickly before we go, I know in the Senate you sit next to David Perdue, a senator from Georgia. These races, these runoffs in Georgia could determine control of the Senate. We have your Democratic colleague Joe Manchin saying, don't worry, if Republicans lose control of the Senate, we're not going to pass any of that radical legislation. Don't worry, it's going to be totally fine. Take your eyes off Georgia. Do you buy that kind of a narrative coming now from the Democrats, or do you think that really we could be seeing a tidal wave of radicalism if Republicans don't hold the Senate?
I don't buy it at all. On January 5th, we have 2 Senate races on the ballot in Georgia. They are the most indescribably important Senate races of our lifetimes. If the Democrats win, Chuck Schumer in all likelihood becomes majority leader. And if Chuck Schumer is majority leader, he will end the filibuster. He will pass a massive tax increase. He will pass the Green New Deal. He will pass massive amnesty for 15 million people here illegally, and they will pack the U.S. Supreme Court. And I mentioned a minute ago my book, One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. That book, which has been a New York Times bestseller for 5 consecutive weeks now, explains how every one of our rights that we value so much, free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, those rights are hanging by a single vote. And Georgia, if the Democrats win in Georgia, they will pack the Supreme Court and take away our rights. I'll tell you, I'm going to Georgia. I'm campaigning. We need every common sense conservative, every lover of liberty in Georgia to come out and make sure Republicans keep control of the Senate to stop the radicals.
Senator Cruz writing these best-selling books, doing the Verdict podcast, leading the fight in the Senate. You are putting the rest of us to shame, but we really appreciate it. Keep the faith and stay strong, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Take care. God bless.